Can you smell that? Smells like democracy. Welcome to ancient Greece, a place divided into minuscule city-states with no central power. Great place to be if you like freedom and cheese. The time is 7th century BC and we're about to meet our hero, Solon, born at the end of the ancient Dark Ages. For a period of over 500 years after the Mycenaean collapse, Greece was left without writing, art, great cities, or palaces. Only small cities endured. After the Mycenaeans were knocked out by the Sea Peoples, new tribes came down from the north, the Dorians. The Athenian tribes were Ionian and they resisted the Dorians. The last Athenian king, Codrus, died battling them. Maybe. We'll get back to that. The Dorians didn't write stuff down, but they kept an oral tradition of epic poems. Homer, maybe one guy, probably many, comes from this period. The Greek war machine evolved during this time. Heavy infantrymen started fighting in tight formations. Nice and snug. Also, the first Olympiad, the first coins were invented in Lydia and then adopted by the Greeks, the first biremes and then triremes all come from this age. Democracy took generations to develop. There were some leaps, and there was also some backsliding. One of the most important hops forward was made by Solon, the first dude to really push the whole power to the people thing. He is born in Athens, but Athens isn't just a city, it is Attica, a region united under Athens. You can be a villager in the hills, an aristocrat on the plains, or a merchant in a port, and you would still be an Athenian citizen. There are at this time 50,000 citizens, that is, free men that are born in Athens from Athenian parents. Women, children, and slaves make up the rest for a total of 200,000 inhabitants. In the beginning, Athens was ruled by legendary kings, guys like Theseus, literal demigods, but as time passed, the quality of leadership declined all the way to Codrus, a semi-legendary human. The story goes that he died battling those damned Dorians, and the people decided to retire the title, like Maradona's jersey in Napoli. Things get fuzzy when you forget how to write stuff down for hundreds of years. Anywho, what probably happened was this. At some point, Athens had kings, but the aristocracy started chipping away at their power, first instituting the office of the Polemarchos, a military commander which was picked from the aristocracy. This makes sense, since the aristocracy were the dudes that had enough money to get themselves armored up and go to war. Then a powerful family, the Medons, took over running the state and left the king only his religious duties. And in time, eventually, even that ended up being an elected office like the Polemarchos. Evidence of this is that the dude in charge of religious matters continued to be called king, Basileos, all the way to the end of Greek democracy. When the Medons took power, they decided to take the title of archon, a sort of regent or magistrate for life. They were soon pushed aside by other powerful families, and the archonship became available to all aristocrats. In the 8th century BC, the term in office was shortened to 10 years and then shortened again to 1 year. 6 more archons were added, less important than the main 3, and that gives us a nice uneven number of 9 archons. But the main dude in charge was the archon Eponymos. Before Solon came into the picture, the Greeks in Attica asked nicely a man named Dracon to write down some laws for them, so that judging would not be done willy-nilly. Very important step to have your laws written down. At this point, the Greeks had rediscovered writing. And Dracon delivered, one of the most severe legislations ever. When they say something is draconian, they're talking about this guy and his laws. The law was pretty direct. Most offenses ended in death. Famously, even stealing a head of cabbage was a death sentence. However, in Dracon's law, intent was important. If you killed someone accidentally, you only got exiled. And they didn't even confiscate your property, which is more lenient compared to what the cabbage thief got, but maybe Athenians really liked cabbage. No way to know for sure. Where were we? Ah yes, baby Solon. He was born part of an aristocratic family that could trace his lineage all the way to King Codrus. So he had aristocratic blood. But he was broke. His father had squandered most of the family money. So what can a broke aristocrat do but become a merchant? He set sail for Egypt and Asia Minor, got himself an education, money, and life experience. He learned poetry. Most of the stuff we know about him comes from his elegies, so that is accurate. Anybody writing poems about himself would only tell the truth. Right? Right. His political life started with one of these elegies where he convinced the people of Athens to go to war for Salamis, an island near Athens. The Athenians appointed him commander of the army, and he took back the island from Megara. Good job. The Athenian aristocrats appreciated good leadership and decided to give him a mandate to fix Athens. It's important that he had aristocratic blood and he had worked his way up from poverty. He could understand both sides. He knew that the laws were too harsh, that poor people were starving and selling themselves into debt slavery, and that people with money, merchants without aristocratic ties for instance, would finance the state but would not have a say in running the state. So he turned the boat around. He forgave the poor Athenians their debts. He freed every Athenian from slavery, even went so far as to buy back Athenians sold into slavery outside Athens. He forbid anyone from selling themselves or their children into slavery, however tempting that may be, and he forbid slavery of all Athenian citizens. Yeah, he did not free every slave. Athens continued to have slaves, just not Athenian slaves. Now, because he upgraded a lot of slaves into poor people, he forbid the selling of grain outside of Athens so that the price would stay low. This was also a strategy to weaken their neighbors that relied on that wheat, places like Megara. He encouraged people to cultivate olive trees and sell olive oil. He encouraged foreigners, skilled craftsmen, to settle in Athens, even gave them citizenship, which is a rare move for Greece at this period, where to become a citizen you usually have to be born a citizen. What do these craftsmen make? Things like pottery. Athens is very well known for its pottery in an age where pottery is very important. Clay pots is where you store all your stuff. Wine, olive oil, grain, philosophers. And because all of this wasn't impressive enough, he decided to really flex his muscles with this next thing, changing society as a whole. He split the citizens into 4 classes with different responsibilities and privileges according to their wealth. First class, really rich dudes that had over 500 bushels of grain, or the equivalent of that in olive trees, etc. If you were in this class, you could be a military organizer or a commander, and you could be elected to be one of the archons. Second class, pretty rich dudes that had 300 to 500 bushels. If you were in this class, you had to serve in the cavalry, provide yourself with a horse, armor, and weapons, and you could be elected as one of the archons. Third class, dudes that had 200 to 300 bushels. A third class citizen had to serve in the infantry as a hoplite, the backbone of the Athenian army. You had to be able to buy yourself armor and weapons, but you cannot be elected. And lastly, fourth class, below 200 bushels, you are too poor to buy yourself anything, but the state will happily provide you with an oar and you will serve in the navy. And no, you cannot hold office. If you're thinking about slaves, they rarely served in the army. Fighting was done by the citizens. Now, since the archons can only be elected from the first 2 categories, this makes this system of government a democracy, where only the wealthy can get elected to rule the state, unlike today, where it's mostly the same thing. Solon also decided to stick his governmental nose in everybody's business, with a set of sumptuary laws, regulating how people could display wealth in funerals. For the Greeks, mourning the dead was a perfect time to show off their wealth. Solon argued that this created social tensions, but I think he just hated funerals. One of his laws stated that no tomb could cost more to make than 10 people working on it for 3 days. This is the reason we don't get pyramids in Greece. How are you going to build a pyramid in 3 days? Unless... never mind. He eased up the draconian laws but kept the death sentence for intentional murder. He also gave all the male citizens the right to vote, but he kept in check the power of the people. It went something like this. A council of 400 randomly selected men would write up a law, then all the citizens would vote on it. And if they approved a stupid law, a council of elders made up of former archons could veto it. This is a system of checks and balances on the people's power. Very impressive. This is one of the reasons why he is known as one of the 7 sages of Greece. What are the 6? No idea. He also invited the citizens to sue one another and seek justice in front of a jury of their peers. And these trials were quite something, with 501 jurors. He also brought in the institution of the appeal, very important, a countermeasure for bad trials. After doing all this, he needed vacation, so he packed up his bags and left for Egypt. He voluntarily gave up all his power as Archon and made them promise not to change his laws for at least 10 years, giving all these changes time to ferment. In Egypt, he discussed philosophy and learned about Atlantis. He went to Cyprus and oversaw the construction of a new capital in that kingdom. He visited Lydia and met Croesus, man renowned for his stupendous wealth. Count no man happy until he is dead. That's what he told Croesus. Very Greek. After his travels, he went back to Athens and lived long enough to see a tyrant come to power, Pisistratus. One man ruling Athens alone, once again. And then he died. All that work for nothing. Just kidding. Democracy did come back, better than ever after Pisistratus and his sons, because the Athenians knew better. All that fermenting paid off. Congratulations, now you know how democracy started and why Solon is the grandfather of democracy. You know, ancient Greeks would not view modern representative democracy as democracy at all. For them, every law was validated by essentially a referendum. every citizen voted directly on every law. Letting a guy vote for you would look very silly to an ancient Athenian.